Martha Callahan pressed her palm against her chest and forced herself to breathe. The stagecoach had left her standing in the middle of nowhere, Texas, with nothing but a carpet bag and a letter from a man who didn't know she existed. She'd traveled 1,500 miles to marry a stranger. But the stranger hadn't sent for her. His 10-year-old daughter had. Welcome to Martha's story of finding family in the most unexpected place. If you're watching tonight, drop your city in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Hit subscribe and stay with me to the end. This one's going to break your heart and put it back together again. The Texas sun didn't shine. It punished. Martha Callahan stood on the wooden platform at Thornton Station, sweat already soaking through her cotton dress, and watched the stagecoach disappear into a cloud of red dust. Her carpet bag sat at her feet like a faithful dog, waiting for direction she couldn't give. Nobody was here. The platform was empty, except for a weathered bench and a water barrel covered in flies. Beyond that, a dirt road stretched toward a cluster of buildings that might generously be called a town. Heat waves rose from the ground, making everything shimmer and dance like a fever dream. She pulled the letter from her pocket, the paper soft from handling, and read it again even though she'd memorized every word. Mr. Jacob Thornton seeks respectable woman for partnership on cattle ranch. Room and board provided. Serious inquiries only. Thornton Station, Texas. She'd answered that letter 6 weeks ago, sitting in a boarding house in St. Louis that smelled like boiled cabbage and broken dreams. The landlady had made it clear pay by Friday or sleep in the street. Martha had neither money nor prospects. She'd had a good job once. Head cook at the Morrison Hotel, respected, well paid. Then Mr. Morrison had cornered her in the pantry with whiskey on his breath and suggestions no decent woman should hear. When she'd pushed him away, he'd called her a thief, planted silverware in her room, had her thrown out without a reference. Nobody believed the fat cook over the wealthy hotel owner. So here she stood, 30 years old, alone, with exactly $4.37 to her name. Her dress clung to her ample figure in the heat. Sweat trickled down between her shoulder blades. Her face was probably red as a tomato. Not exactly the picture of a desirable bride. "You the mail-order woman?" Martha turned. A man stood at the edge of the platform, weathered and suspicious, wearing a shopkeeper's apron. "I'm Martha Callahan. I'm here to meet Mr. Thornton." The man squinted at her, taking in her size, her plain face, her damp dress. His expression said everything his words didn't. "Thornton ain't here." He spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Ain't nobody waiting for you, ma'am." The words landed like stones. "Perhaps he's delayed," Martha said, keeping her voice steady through sheer willpower. "I'll wait. Suit yourself." The man shrugged. "But the Thornton Ranch is 8 miles west. Jake don't come to town unless supplies run out or somebody's dying. And I ain't seen him in 3 weeks. He walked away, leaving Martha alone with the flies and the brutal sun. She sat on the bench because standing took too much energy. The heat pressed down on her like a physical weight. Back in Ohio, summer meant warm breezes and evening thunderstorms. Here, it felt like the sky itself was trying to crush her. An hour passed. Then 2. The town, such as it was, showed no interest in her existence. A few people walked by, glanced at her, looked away. One woman, pretty and proper in a blue dress, actually crossed to the other side of the street to avoid walking near the platform. Martha pretended not to notice. She'd learned that skill in St. Louis in the charity lines and the cheap boarding houses. The art of being invisible. The talent for pretending that other people's disgust didn't cut like knives. "Ma'am?" The voice was small, uncertain. Martha looked up. A girl stood at the edge of the platform, maybe 10 years old, skinny as a fence rail. Her blonde hair escaped a braid in sweaty tangles, and her dress was too short in the sleeves. But her eyes gray as storm clouds studied Martha with an intensity that belonged to someone much older. "Yes." The girl took a step closer. Her boots were scuffed and dusty. "Are you the lady from the letter, the one who answered about the partnership?" Martha's heart stumbled. "I'm Martha Callahan. I wrote to Mr. Thornton about— I know. The girl's face broke into a smile that transformed her entirely from worried child to radiant hope. You came. You actually came. Something cold, that had nothing to do with the absent shade, settled in Martha's stomach. Did Mr. Thornton send you to fetch me? The smile faltered. The girl looked down at her boots, then back at Martha, then at the distant road. Not exactly. What does not exactly mean? It means— The girl twisted her hands in her skirt. It means Papa doesn't know you're coming. He doesn't know about the letter. I'm the one who wrote it. The words hit Martha like a bucket of cold water. You wrote the letter. Yes, ma'am. You forged your father's name. Yes, ma'am. And convinced a complete stranger to travel 1,500 miles under false pretenses. The girl's chin lifted defiance born of desperation. Martha recognized it instantly. Yes, ma'am, I did. Despite everything, the heat, the exhaustion, the dawning horror of her situation, Martha felt something that might have been admiration. This child had committed fraud with remarkable competence. How old are you? 10. Almost 11. And you forged letters, answered correspondence, and arranged for a mail-order bride without your father knowing any of it. Yes, ma'am. Why? The defiance cracked. Beneath it, Martha saw something raw and desperate and heartbreakingly young. Because he's dying, the girl whispered. Not his body, his heart. Ever since Mama passed, he don't smile anymore. Don't laugh, don't hardly talk except to give orders. He works from before dawn till after dark, and when he's done working, he just sits and stares at nothing. The girl's voice broke. He's disappearing, ma'am, a little bit every day, and I don't know how to stop it. I thought maybe if someone came, someone who needed us as much as we needed— Stop. Martha held up her hand. The girl's desperation was too familiar, cut too close to her own bone-deep loneliness. What's your name? Rosie. Rosie Thornton. Rosie. Martha took a breath, trying to think past the panic rising in her chest. Your father is going to be furious. I know. He'll likely send me away immediately. Maybe. Rosie's voice was small but steady. Or maybe he'll let you stay. Why would he do that? Rosie looked at Martha. Really looked at her, not at her size or her plain face or her sweat-stained dress, but at her. Because you're still here. You heard the truth, and you didn't just leave on the next stage. That means something. The next stage doesn't come for 3 days. I couldn't leave if I wanted to. But you're still talking to me. Rosie took another step forward. You didn't yell or cry or call me wicked. Most ladies would have. Mrs. Patterson in town says I'm a wild child who'll come to a bad end. Mrs. Patterson sounds like a charming woman. A tiny smile flickered across Rosie's face. She's got a face like a prune and a heart to match. Martha surprised herself by almost laughing. Rosie, I have $4 to my name. That's everything I own in this world. I cannot afford passage back east. I have no family, no references that anyone would believe, and a reputation destroyed by lies I couldn't fight. She met the girl's eyes. If your father sends me away, I have nowhere to go. Then we better make sure he doesn't send you away. How exactly do you propose we do that? Rosie reached for Martha's carpetbag. Come home with me. Meet him. Let him see you're not dangerous or crazy or any of the things he's going to think at first. He's going to think I'm a desperate woman who answered a fraudulent letter, which is exactly what I am. No. Rosie's grip tightened on the bag's handle. You're a woman who came anyway, who's still standing here even though you know the truth. Papa respects courage, even when he don't want to. And what about my appearance? Martha gestured at herself, at the body that had made her invisible or mockable her whole life. I'm not exactly what most men picture when they think of a frontier bride. Rosie's brow furrowed. What's wrong with your appearance? I'm fat, child. Surely you noticed. I noticed you've got kind eyes and steady hands. Rosie shrugged. Mama always said pretty fades and mean lasts. She said what matters is what's underneath. Martha's throat tightened unexpectedly. Your mother sounds like she was wise. She was the best. Rosie's voice dropped to almost nothing. I miss her every single day. So does Papa, even though he pretends he don't feel anything anymore. The sun continued its assault. Martha's dress was now completely soaked through. Her feet ached in her only pair of boots. Every sensible instinct told her to refuse to wait for the stage to go anywhere else. But where? Back to St. Louis, where they called her a thief, to some other strange town with no money and no references. At least here, there was a child who looked at her like she mattered. How far is the ranch? Rosie's smile could have powered the sun. 8 miles. I brought the wagon. We can be there before supper if we hurry. Your father let you drive a wagon 8 miles alone. Papa don't exactly know I'm here. I told Tommy I was going to check the fence line near the creek. Who's Tommy? Ranch hand. He's 19 and sweet on Lucy Miller in town, so he don't pay much attention to what I do. Martha shook her head slowly. You're quite the schemer, aren't you? I do what needs doing. Rosie picked up the carpetbag, staggering slightly under its weight. Mama taught me that too. She said women can't always wait for men to fix things. Sometimes we gotta fix them ourselves. They walked toward the wagon together, Martha's larger body casting a shadow over the girl's slight frame. The town watched them go. She could feel the eyes on her back, feel the judgment radiating from doorways and windows. Let them look. Let them talk. She'd been looked at and talked about her whole life. At least this time she was walking toward something, instead of running from disaster. The wagon was old, but sturdy, the horse patient. Rosie climbed up and took the reins with the easy confidence of someone who'd been driving since she could see over the horse's back. You coming? Martha heaved herself up onto the seat, the wagon creaking under her weight. Another reminder of her size. Another small humiliation she'd learned to swallow without flinching. Rosie either didn't notice or didn't care. She clicked her tongue at the horse, and they lurched forward onto the dusty road. Tell me about your father, Martha said as they left the town behind. What should I expect? He's quiet, works all the time. Don't trust easy. Rosie's hands were steady on the reins. He was different before Mama died. He used to tell jokes and dance with her in the kitchen. He even sang sometimes. What happened to your mother? Fever. 4 years ago come September. Rosie's voice went flat, the way children's voices do when they're trying very hard not to feel something. She was sick for a week. Papa barely slept. He had the doctor come from Austin, but it didn't help. She just got weaker and weaker until one morning she didn't wake up. I'm sorry. Everybody's sorry. Sorry don't change nothing. Rosie snapped the reins, urging the horse faster. After she died, Papa closed up like a fist. He stopped singing, stopped laughing, stopped seeing anything but work. And you thought bringing a stranger into the house would open him up again. I thought... Rosie hesitated. I thought maybe if someone needed him, really needed him, he'd have to come back. He'd have to remember how to be alive. Martha understood that logic. It was the logic of desperate people everywhere, the belief that if you just found the right key, you could unlock the doors that grief had sealed shut. It rarely worked that way, but she didn't say that to Rosie. What if he just stays closed? Martha asked instead. What if having me there makes things worse? Then at least I tried. Rosie's jaw set in a way that reminded Martha of herself at that age, stubborn and scared, and refusing to give up. I couldn't just sit there watching him turn into a ghost. I had to do something. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the horse's hooves on packed dirt. The landscape rolled away in every direction, brown and gold with summer drought. Martha had never seen so much space, endless sky, meeting endless land, in a way that made her feel both tiny and strangely free. What happened to you? Rosie asked suddenly. In your letter you said you needed a new beginning. What happened to the old one? Martha considered lying, considered giving the sanitized version she'd prepared for polite company. But this child had told her the truth. Maybe she owed the same. I worked as a cook in a hotel. The owner wanted things I wasn't willing to give. When I refused him, he accused me of stealing, planted evidence in my room. Martha's hands tightened in her lap. No one believed me. A fat cook's word against a wealthy man's. I lost my job, my reputation, everything I'd built. That's wicked. Rosie's voice was fierce. That man should be in jail. The world doesn't always punish the wicked or reward the good. Mama used to say something like that. She said life ain't fair, but we still have to try to make it fairer. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Rosie's voice softened. Papa loved her something fierce. I think that's why losing her broke him so bad. He loved too much. Martha thought about that as they drove toward an uncertain future. She'd never loved too much. She'd been too busy surviving, too focused on work and wages and keeping herself fed and sheltered. Romance had always seemed like a luxury for prettier women with easier lives. But watching this child who'd lost everything and still fought for her father, Martha wondered if maybe she'd had it backwards. Maybe love wasn't a luxury. Maybe it was the whole point. There, Rosie pointed ahead. That's our land. The fence line starts here. The Thornton Ranch spread out before them, thousands of acres of brown grass and scattered cattle. In the distance, Martha could see buildings, a house, a barn. Smaller structures clustered around a windmill that turned lazily in the hot breeze. It's big, she said. Papa runs about 200 head. Would be more, but the drought's been hard. Lost 30 cattle last summer to the heat. Rosie guided the wagon through a gate. This year's worse. The creek's nearly dry. We've been hauling water from the well, but even that's getting low. What happens if the well runs dry? Then we lose everything. Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact, the voice of a child who'd already lost too much to be surprised by disaster. Papa's been talking about selling. Mr. Coleman, next ranch over, keeps offering to buy our land. Papa don't want to, but if the water goes... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. They pulled up in front of the house, a low wooden structure that had once been painted white, but had faded to gray under the relentless sun. A porch stretched across the front, shaded by an overhang that was missing several boards. Stay here, Rosie said, jumping down. Let me tell him first. Rosie. But the girl was already running toward the barn, disappearing through doors that stood open against the heat. Martha sat in the wagon carpetbag in her lap and waited for the explosion. It came in the form of silence first, then voices. Rosie's high and rapid, a man's low and sharp. Then footsteps. Jacob Thornton emerged from the barn like a storm rolling across the prairie. He was tall and lean, the kind of thin that came from working too hard and eating too little. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples, jaw set hard enough to cut stone. His eyes found Martha immediately gray like his daughter's, but colder, emptied of whatever warmth they'd once held. He stopped 10 feet from the wagon and stared. Martha stared back. She'd spent her whole life being stared at, being judged for her size, her plainness. She refused to look away first. You, the woman from the letters. His voice was rough, unused. I'm Martha Callahan, and I'm guessing you're as surprised to see me as I am to be here. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she wasn't crying or cowering. My daughter tells me she's committed forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to bring a complete stranger 1,500 miles under false pretenses. That's an accurate summary. She also tells me you have nowhere to go. Martha's chin lifted. Also accurate. I have $4.37. The next stage doesn't come for 3 days. I'd already spent everything I had just getting here. So you need charity. I need work. The words came out stronger than she'd intended. I don't want charity, Mr. Thornton. Never have, never will. What I want is a chance to earn my keep. Earn your keep. He looked at her damp dress, her ample figure, her red face, and his skepticism was written clear as day. Doing what exactly? I can cook. Ran a hotel kitchen for 7 years before circumstances changed. I can clean, mend, preserve food. Tend gardens, keep accounts. Martha met his gaze without flinching. I can also learn whatever else needs doing. I'm not afraid of hard work. This is a cattle ranch, Miss Callahan, not a hotel. I noticed. I also noticed your porch is missing boards, your fence posts are rotting, and your daughter is running errands that should be done by hired help. Martha gestured toward the house. You're stretched too thin, Mr. Thornton. I can see it. Your daughter can see it. That's why she did what she did. Behind him, Rosie had crept closer, her face pale with hope and fear. She's 10 years old, Martha continued. She should be playing going to school, being a child. Instead, she's forging letters and driving wagons 8 miles alone because she's terrified of losing her father the way she lost her mother. Thornton's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about... I know desperation when I see it. I've worn it myself. Martha climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady, but her voice clear. Your daughter didn't trick me, Mr. Thornton. She offered me something I needed, a chance to be useful, to belong somewhere, to earn my place instead of begging for it. That's not her fault. That's mine. The silence stretched between them, hot and heavy as the summer air. Rosie's eyes darted between her father and Martha, her whole body tense. Finally, Thornton spoke. 3 days until the stage. Yes. You can sleep in the storage room off the kitchen. You'll cook and clean for your room and board. 3 days. His voice was flat, giving nothing away. Then you're gone. This isn't permanent. Understood. And you. He turned to Rosie, who shrank slightly under his gaze. We're going to have a very long talk about lying and forgery, and what happens to little girls who think they can run their fathers' lives. Yes, Papa, Rosie whispered. Thornton turned and walked back toward the barn without another word. Martha watched him go, then looked at Rosie. The girl's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. He didn't send you away, she whispered. He could have. He wanted to. But he didn't. He gave me 3 days. That's not exactly a warm welcome. It's more than he's given anyone since Mama died. Rosie picked up Martha's carpet bag. 3 days is enough. Enough for what? Rosie's smile widened, fierce and determined. Enough to show him he's wrong. Martha followed the girl toward the house, her legs aching from sitting so long, her dress stuck to her skin with sweat. Inside, she found exactly what she'd expected, a home that had stopped being a home when the woman who'd made it one had died. Dust coated every surface. Dishes sat unwashed in a dry sink. The curtains hung crooked. The floors unswept, the whole place carrying the hollow feeling of a building where people survived but didn't live. Mama kept it nicer, Rosie said quietly, watching Martha take it all in. Papa tries, but he don't see the mess anymore. Or maybe he just don't care. Martha saw more than mess. She saw grief made visible, loss made tangible in every neglected corner and dusty surface. Show me where things are, she said. We have 3 days. Let's not waste them. That night, lying on a narrow cot in a storage room that smelled like dried beans and old memories, Martha stared at the darkness and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. 3 days, 72 hours, to prove herself useful to a man who didn't want her here in a place she'd never imagined, doing work she'd never tried. The sensible thing would be to count the hours until the stage came, take whatever charity the town might offer, and move on to somewhere else. But Martha was tired of being sensible, tired of running, tired of letting other people's judgments determine her path. She was fat, she was plain, she was desperate and penniless and completely alone. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, none of that mattered. Because a 10-year-old girl had looked at her like she was worth something, had fought for her without knowing her, had seen past all the things Martha hated about herself to something worth saving. Maybe that was foolish. Maybe it was dangerous to put hope in a child's scheme. But hope was all Martha had left. She closed her eyes and let the unfamiliar sounds of the Texas night carry her toward sleep. Outside, the windmill creaked. Cattle lowed in the distance. Somewhere, a coyote called to the moon. And in a room down the hall, a little girl probably lay awake too, praying that tomorrow everything would change. Martha prayed too, though she wasn't sure to whom. Please, she thought. Let this be the beginning of something. Let this be home. The heat pressed in through the thin walls, relentless even in darkness. But Martha Callahan had survived worse than heat. She'd survived fire and loss, and the systematic destruction of everything she'd built. 3 days wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had yesterday, and for now, that would have to be enough. Martha woke before dawn, her body stiff from the narrow cot, but her mind already racing. She'd slept in worse places these past months. Charity beds, train stations, one memorable night, huddled behind a feed store in Kansas City. At least this room had walls and a door that locked. She dressed quickly in the darkness, choosing her plainest dress, the one that hid the most. Her hands trembled as she pinned her hair, but she steadied them with sheer will. 3 days to prove herself. She wouldn't waste a single hour. The kitchen was larger than she'd expected, with a good iron stove and plenty of workspace. But everything was coated in grease and neglect. Pots sat unwashed. The flour bin held more weevils than flour. The wood box was nearly empty. Martha rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time pale light crept through the dirty windows, she had the stove fired up, the kitchen scrubbed, and coffee brewing strong enough to wake the dead. She'd found eggs in a basket by the door, bacon in the smokehouse, and enough clean flour to make biscuits. Footsteps on the porch, heavy, deliberate. Jacob Thornton stopped in the doorway, his face still creased from sleep, and stared. What in God's name? Coffee's ready. Martha didn't turn from the stove. Breakfast in 10 minutes. You like your eggs scrambled or fried? I don't. He seemed to struggle for words. I usually just have coffee. That explains why you're thin as a fence post. Martha cracked eggs into a bowl with practiced efficiency. Scrambled it is. Sit down. Miss Callahan. Martha. And the eggs are getting cold while you stand there catching flies. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite amusement, but close. He sat. Martha served him scrambled eggs, bacon crispy at the edges, biscuits that steamed when he broke them open. She poured coffee strong and black into a chipped mug and set it before him like a challenge. Eat. He ate, mechanically at first, fork to mouth without tasting. Then slower. His eyes flickered to her, then away, then back again. This is good, he said finally. I know. Real good. Better than... He stopped himself. Better than what you've been eating. Martha sat down across from him with her own plate. I saw your larder, Mr. Thornton. Moldy bread and dried beans don't exactly inspire confidence. Been busy. Been grieving. The words came out before she could stop them. There's a difference. His jaw tightened. You don't know anything about... I know food. I know a man who's stopped taking care of himself. I know a kitchen that hasn't seen a proper meal in months. Martha met his gaze. I'm not here to judge you, Mr. Thornton. I'm here to cook. Let me do my job. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then Rosie burst through the door, her hair wild from sleep, her eyes going wide at the sight of the table. You made breakfast? She slid into her chair, grabbing a biscuit before her father could object. Real breakfast, with eggs and everything. Manners, Rosie, Jake said, but there was no heat in it. Yes, Papa. Rosie grinned at Martha with her mouth full. This is amazing. We ain't had biscuits since... She stopped abruptly. The joy on her face flickered, replaced by something older and sadder. "Since Mama," she finished quietly. The temperature in the room dropped despite the summer heat already building outside. Jake pushed back from the table. "I got work to do. Rosie, show Miss Callahan whatever she needs for the kitchen. Stay out of my way, both of you." He was gone before Martha could respond, the door banging shut behind him. Rosie stared at her plate. "He does that. Runs away when feelings get too close." "Lots of people do." Martha poured the girl more milk. "Finish eating. We've got a house to clean." They worked through the morning, Martha attacking the neglect with the same fierce efficiency she'd once brought to the Morrison Hotel kitchen. Rosie proved surprisingly capable fetching and carrying without complaint, answering Martha's questions about where things belonged. "Mama used to keep the good dishes up here," Rosie said, standing on a chair to reach a high cabinet. "Papa put them away after she died, said looking at them hurt too much. Do you want to bring them back down?" Rosie considered this, her small face serious. "Maybe, someday. When it don't hurt him so much." Martha nodded, filing this away. The child understood her father's grief better than most adults would. By noon, the kitchen gleamed. The main room was dusted and swept, the windows cleaned for the first time in what looked like years. Martha's back ached and her dress was soaked through with sweat, but the satisfaction running through her was worth every twinge. "You work fast," Rosie said, wiping her forehead. "Mama used to say the house felt different when it was clean, like it could breathe again." "Houses need tending just like people." Martha surveyed their work. "Now what does your father eat for lunch?" "Usually nothing. He works straight through till supper." "That's going to change." Martha packed a basket with sandwiches, cold water from the well, and the last of the morning's biscuits. She handed it to Rosie. "Take this to him." "Me?" Rosie's eyes went wide. "He don't like being interrupted when he's working." "He'll like starving even less. Go on, tell him it's from you if that makes it easier." Rosie hesitated, then squared her small shoulders and headed for the door. Martha watched her go, a tiny figure trudging toward the distant barn, with a basket almost too heavy for her thin arms. 20 minutes later, the girl came running back, her face split in a grin. "He ate it, all of it, and he said—" She stopped to catch her breath. "He said to tell you the biscuits were decent." "Decent," Martha snorted. "High praise indeed." "For Papa it is." Rosie grabbed Martha's hand impulsively. "He talked to me, Martha. Really talked. Asked about my morning. He ain't done that in forever." Something warm uncurled in Martha's chest, unexpected and dangerous. "Don't get attached," she told herself. 3 days, then you're gone." But Rosie was still holding her hand, and the warmth wouldn't go away. The afternoon brought visitors. Martha was kneading bread when she heard hooves approaching. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window. A buggy pulled up in front of the house, driven by a woman in her 30s, wearing a dress far too fine for the Texas heat. Behind her sat an older woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. Rosie appeared at Martha's elbow, her expression darkening. "That's Mrs. Miller and her daughter Agnes." The girl's voice dripped with distaste. "Agnes has been trying to get Papa to court her for 2 years. She comes by with Christian Charity every couple weeks to check on us." "I take it you're not fond of her." "She calls me poor motherless thing and looks at me like I'm a stray dog." Rosie's chin lifted. "And she's mean. Sweet talks Papa while looking at me like I'm dirt." The women were already climbing down from the buggy, adjusting their hats and smoothing their skirts. "Go find your father," Martha said quietly. "Tell him we have company. But, go. I can handle 2 church ladies." Rosie slipped out the back door as Martha smoothed her sweat-stained dress and opened the front one. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" Agnes Miller's smile froze on her pretty face. Her eyes traveled from Martha's plain hair to her ample figure to her flour-dusted apron, and her expression shifted into something uglier. "I'm sorry, we were looking for the Thornton residence." "You've found it. I'm Martha Callahan. Won't you come in?" The older woman, Mrs. Miller. Martha presumed recovered faster than her daughter. How interesting. We weren't aware Jacob had hired help. She stepped past Martha into the clean kitchen, her sharp eyes missing nothing. I'm Helen Miller. This is my daughter Agnes. We're neighbors from the next ranch over. A pleasure. You've been busy, I see. Helen surveyed the spotless room. The place looks different than our last visit. It needed attention. Agnes had finally found her voice. And you're here as, what exactly? A housekeeper. I'm here to help where I'm needed. Martha gestured toward the table. Please sit. I'll make tea. That won't be necessary. Agnes's voice had gone cold. We came to see Jacob, not the hired help. Agnes. Helen's tone carried warning. What I'm simply stating facts. Agnes turned to Martha with a smile that showed too many teeth. No offense intended, Miss Callahan, was it? It's just unusual to find a woman here. An unmarried woman, I mean. Alone with a widower and his child. My employment is entirely proper, I assure you. I'm sure it is. Agnes's eyes traveled pointedly over Martha's body. Though I can't imagine what kind of employment would bring someone of your stature all the way to Texas. The insult landed exactly as intended. Martha had heard variations of it her whole life. Fat, homely, undesirable. She'd developed armor against such cruelty, but armor didn't mean the blows didn't hurt. It just meant she'd learned not to show the bruises. I was a head cook in St. Louis, Martha said evenly. Before that, Cincinnati. I've worked in some of the finest hotels in the Midwest. Mr. Thornton needed help. I was available. How convenient. Agnes, that's enough. Helen Miller rose, her expression thoughtful. Miss Callahan, you'll have to forgive my daughter. She's protective of the Thornton family. We all are. Jacob has had a difficult time since Sarah's passing. I understand. Do you... Helen's eyes met Martha's, and something passed between them. An assessment. A judgment. This is a small community, Miss Callahan. People talk. A woman of uncertain background appearing suddenly at a widower's ranch. Well, you understand how that might look. I understand perfectly. Martha kept her voice steady. And I assure you, my intentions are entirely honorable. I'm here to work, nothing more. Of course you are. Agnes's smile sharpened. Though I wonder what Mr. Thornton thinks about having a woman like you under his roof. You could ask him yourself. Jake's voice came from the doorway, hard and flat. He's standing right here. Agnes whirled her expression, transforming instantly from cruel to coy. Jacob, we came to check on you and Rosie. We had no idea you'd hired someone. Now you know. Jake moved past them to stand beside Martha in a way that felt deliberate, protective almost. Miss Callahan is working here temporarily. She's a trained cook and housekeeper. That's all anyone needs to know. Of course. Agnes reached out to touch his arm. I just worry about you, Jacob. It's been so long since Sarah and I know how hard it must be. I'm managing fine. But this woman, Agnes gestured dismissively at Martha. Surely you could find more suitable help. I'd be happy to ask around at church. There must be respectable widows who... Miss Callahan is respectable enough for my needs. The words hung in the air, more forceful than Martha had expected. She glanced at Jake, but his face was unreadable. Helen Miller stood pulling her daughter with her. We should go. I'm sure Mr. Thornton has work to do. She paused at the door, looking back at Martha. It was interesting meeting you, Miss Callahan. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. I'm sure. Agnes's parting look promised that this wasn't over. Then they were gone, the buggy wheels kicking up dust as they drove away. Rosie emerged from wherever she'd been hiding, her face flushed with anger. I hate her. She's the worst person in the whole territory. Rosie. Jake's voice was tired. Well, she is. Did you hear what she said to Martha about her stature? Rosie spat the word like a curse. That's just mean. Miss Miller has opinions about everything, Jake said. Best to ignore her. You didn't ignore her. Rosie crossed her arms. You stood up for Martha. You never do that. Something flickered across Jake's face. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort at being caught showing emotion. I defended my hired help, that's all. That ain't... Rosie. Martha stepped in, recognizing the need to diffuse. Would you check on the bread? I think it's almost ready to go in the oven. The girl hesitated, clearly wanting to argue, then nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Martha and Jake stood alone in the quiet room. Thank you, Martha said softly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He wouldn't meet her eyes. You work for me. That makes you my responsibility. Is that all it was? Responsibility? The question surprised them both. Martha felt heat rise in her cheeks. Stupid. Stupid. Why had she said that? Jake was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Agnes Miller has been circling since before Sarah was cold in the ground. She doesn't want a husband. She wants a ranch, a position, someone to give her standing in the community. And you're not interested. I was married to the finest woman I ever knew. His voice roughened. I ain't looking to replace her with someone who sees me as a business opportunity. Not everyone who's interested in you wants your ranch. The words were out before Martha could stop them. Her face went crimson. Dear God, what was wrong with her? But Jake just looked at her. Really looked for the first time since she'd arrived. I know, he said quietly. Then he walked out, leaving Martha standing alone with her racing heart and the faint, terrifying suspicion that she was already in far deeper than 3 days would allow. The second day passed faster than the first. Martha threw herself into work with desperate energy, trying to exhaust the thoughts that kept surfacing at inconvenient moments. The way Jake had stood beside her, the roughness in his voice when he talked about his wife, the way his eyes had met hers in that quiet room. Stop it, she told herself. He's not interested. You're not his type. You're nobody's type. But she couldn't shake the memory of him defending her to Agnes Miller. Couldn't forget that he'd called her respectable enough. It wasn't much. It wasn't anything, really. So why did it feel like everything? By evening, she'd preserved a week's worth of vegetables from the neglected garden, mended 6 shirts, and prepared a supper that had both Thorntons eating in appreciative silence. You're good at this, Jake said, pushing back from his empty plate. Real good. Thank you. Where'd you learn to cook like this? My mother, mostly. She ran a boarding house in Ohio before she died. Martha gathered the dishes, keeping her hands busy. Said every meal was a chance to show people they mattered, that feeding someone was a form of love. Sounds like a wise woman. She was. Martha's throat tightened unexpectedly. I was 16 when she passed. Typhoid. Took her in 3 days. The silence that followed was different from before. Softer. Rosie was 6 when Sarah died, Jake said quietly. Fever like your mother. I sat with her for a week watching her fade. His hands tightened on the table edge. Sometimes I still hear her voice in this house, calling me to dinner, singing while she worked. Papa. Rosie's voice was small, uncertain. Jake seemed to realize what he'd said. The walls came back up visible as shutters closing. I got work to do. He stood abruptly. Thank you for supper, Miss Callahan. He was gone before Martha could respond. Rosie stared after him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He almost talked about her, the girl whispered. He never talks about her. Give him time. I've given him 4 years. Rosie's voice cracked. I've given him everything I've got. It's never enough. Martha pulled the girl into her arms, feeling the thin shoulders shake with sobs that had been held back too long. It's not about enough. Martha said softly. Grief doesn't work like that. It's not a debt you can pay off with good behavior. Then how does it work? I don't know, sweetheart. I've never figured that out myself. Martha stroked Rosie's tangled hair. But I know it helps to not be alone. Even when you feel like you want to be. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd lost too much finding comfort in each other. Outside, Martha heard the barn door close, heard Jake's boots on the hard ground as he walked toward some solitary corner of his grief. She wished she could follow him, wished she could tell him that he didn't have to carry it alone. But some doors had to be opened from the inside. All she could do was wait, and hope, and keep cooking meals that showed him he mattered even if he wasn't ready to believe it. The third morning brought trouble. Martha woke to the sound of raised voices outside. She dressed quickly and hurried to the porch to find Jake arguing with a young cowboy she hadn't seen before. Can't just leave Tommy. Not in the middle of calving season. I ain't got a choice, Mr. Thornton. The young man, barely more than a boy, really twisted his hat in his hands. My sister's sick in Austin, real sick. Doc says if I want to see her again, I gotta come now. Jake's face was gray with exhaustion and frustration. How long? Week, maybe 2. I'll come back soon as I can, I swear it. A week. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Tommy, half the herd's about to drop calves. I can't handle that alone. I know, sir. I'm sorry. But she's all the family I got left. The words hit Martha like a physical blow. She saw Jake flinch too, saw the fight drain out of him. Go, he said roughly. Take care of your sister. I'll manage. Tommy's relief was palpable. Thank you, sir. I'll make it up to you, I promise. He was gone within the hour, riding hard toward the rising sun. Jake stood watching until the dust settled his shoulders, bowed with a weight Martha could almost see. I can help. He turned. She was still on the porch, still in her morning dress, but her voice was steady. With the cattle, I mean. I don't know much, but I can learn. And Rosie knows the basics. Between the three of us, you're a cook, Miss Callahan, not a ranch hand. I'm a person who wants to help. Martha stepped off the porch. And right now, that's what you need. Someone willing to do whatever needs doing, no matter how hard. Jake studied her, really studied her, and Martha forced herself not to look away. It's brutal work, he said finally. Dirty, physical. You'll ruin your clothes. These are all the clothes I have. They're already ruined by any standard that used to matter. The heat alone might kill you. Then I'll die being useful instead of sitting in a kitchen while you work yourself into an early grave. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, she wasn't sure he remembered how to smile, but something close. You always this stubborn. I've been told it's one of my more charming qualities. He almost laughed. Almost. Fine. You want to help, I won't stop you. But you do what I say when I say it. No arguments. Yes, sir. And if you can't keep up, I'll keep up. Martha met his eyes. I've survived worse than Texas heat, Mr. Thornton. I survived being called a thief in front of everyone I knew. Survived watching everything I'd built get torn apart by lies. A few hours in the sun won't kill me. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Breakfast first. Then we work. The work was exactly as brutal as he'd warned. Martha learned to check on laboring cattle to recognize the signs of a difficult birth, to fetch water and supplies without being told twice. Her dress was ruined within the first hour, soaked with sweat and worse. Her hands blistered on tools she'd never held before. Her back screamed with every movement. But she didn't stop, didn't complain, didn't slow down. Rosie worked alongside them, small hands busy with tasks suited to her size. She fetched and carried and kept up a stream of chatter that seemed to ease something in her father, even if he rarely responded. By noon, they'd helped 3 calves into the world. By evening, Martha could barely stand. But she stood anyway, serving supper, with hands that shook from exhaustion, refusing to sit until both Thorntons had eaten their fill. You did good today. Jake's voice was grudging but genuine. Real good. Thank you. Most women would have quit after the first hour. I'm not most women. He looked at her then, and something in his eyes had changed. Not warmth exactly, she didn't think Jake Thornton did warmth anymore, but respect. Recognition. No, he said quietly. You're not. Martha went to bed that night with every muscle screaming and her heart doing something dangerous and foolish in her chest. 2 more days, she reminded herself. Then you leave. But lying in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this house that was starting to feel like home, she wasn't sure she wanted to leave anymore. Wasn't sure she could, and that scared her more than anything. The 4th morning, everything changed. Martha woke to the sound of hoofbeats, not one horse, but several. She dressed quickly and emerged to find 3 strangers in the yard, their horses gleaming with sweat. Jake stood facing them, his body tense. The leader dismounted. He was well-dressed, polished boots, expensive hat. His smile was the kind that made Martha's instincts scream. Thornton. The man's voice oozed false friendliness. Thought I'd check on my favorite neighbor. Coleman. Jake's voice could have frozen water. What do you want? Hector Coleman. Martha remembered the name. The man who wanted to buy Jake's land. Just being neighborly. Coleman's eyes swept across the property, calculating. I heard you lost your hired hand. Shame. That's hard luck in the middle of calving season. I'm managing. Are you? Coleman's gaze landed on Martha standing in the doorway. His eyebrows rose. Well, well. Who's this? Don't tell me you finally took a wife, Thornton. She's my cook. Your cook. Coleman's smile widened into something ugly. That's what they're calling it now. Jake took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. Watch your mouth, Coleman. No offense intended. Coleman raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm just surprised, that's all. Didn't think you went for the substantial type. Martha felt the insult land, felt the familiar burn of humiliation. But she kept her face blank, her back straight. She'd survived worse than this. My offer still stands, Coleman continued, turning back to Jake. 2,000 for the whole spread. That's generous given the drought. Most ranches around here won't survive another dry summer. This ranch will survive. With no hands, no water. Coleman laughed. Your well's going dry, Thornton. Everyone knows it. Another month, maybe 2, and you'll be begging me to buy. Get off my land. Think about it. Coleman mounted his horse, still smiling that predator's smile. Pride won't keep your cattle alive. Pride won't put food on the table for that pretty little daughter of yours. He was gone before Jake could respond, his men following in a cloud of dust. Jake stood rigid, staring after them, his whole body vibrating with rage. Martha approached slowly, carefully. Is it true about the well? He didn't answer for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked older than his years. It's getting low. Tommy noticed it before he left. We've been hauling water from the creek, but the creek's nearly dry, too. What happens if we run out? Jake's laugh was bitter. Then Coleman wins. He gets this land for nothing, and I get to watch everything Sarah and I built together turn to dust. Martha looked at this man who'd lost so much, and was about to lose more. Looked at the land that was dying around them, at the future that was slipping away. And something inside her hardened into resolve. Then we find more water. Jake stared at her. We dig a new well, a deeper one. There has to be water somewhere on this property. You don't know anything about... I know about not giving up. Martha stepped closer. I know about fighting for what matters. I know that lying down and waiting to lose isn't an option when someone you love is depending on you. The words hung between them heavier than she'd intended. Someone you love. She hadn't meant to say it like that. Jake's eyes met hers, and for a moment the walls came down. She saw the grief, the exhaustion, the desperate longing for something to hold on to. "Why do you care?" His voice was raw. "You're leaving in 2 days. This isn't your fight." Martha knew the safe answer, the sensible answer, the answer that would protect her heart from the breaking she could feel coming. But she was tired of being safe, tired of being sensible. "Maybe I don't want to leave," she said quietly. "Maybe I found something here worth fighting for." The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things neither of them was ready to say. Then Rosie came running from the house, her face bright with excitement. "Papa, Martha! Come quick, one of the cows is having trouble." The moment shattered. Jake was already moving toward the barn, the rancher taking over from the man. But he paused at the door and looked back at Martha. "We'll talk," he said. "Later. About everything." Then he was gone. Martha stood alone in the morning light, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. 2 more days. But maybe, just maybe, 2 days would become something more. If the water held, if the land survived, if she could find the courage to reach for what she wanted instead of settling for what she thought she deserved. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. "Please," she thought, "let this be real. Let this be the beginning." And somewhere deep in the Texas earth, water waited to be found. The calf was stuck. Martha could see it the moment she reached the barn, the cow straining exhausted, the small hooves visible but not moving forward. Jake was already there, sleeves rolled up, hands slick with blood. "Hold her head," he ordered. "Talk to her. Keep her calm." Martha dropped to her knees beside the laboring animal, stroking the broad forehead, murmuring nonsense words in a low, steady voice. "Easy, girl. Easy now. You're doing fine." "She's been at this too long." Jake's voice was tight with worry. "Calf's turned wrong. I gotta reach in and fix it." Rosie appeared with clean rags and water. Her face was pale, but determined. "What can I do, Papa?" "Pray." Jake positioned himself. "And hand me whatever I need." The next 20 minutes were brutal. Martha held the cow's head while Jake worked his arms, disappearing into the animal as he struggled to turn the calf. Sweat poured down his face. His jaw clenched with effort. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, little one. Work with me." The cow bellowed in pain. Martha tightened her grip, crooning softly. "Almost there, Mama. Almost there. Your baby's coming." "Got it." Jake's voice was triumphant. "I got the leg turned. Now push, girl. Push." One final heave, and the calf slid into the world, wet, bloody, and absolutely still. "No." Rosie's voice cracked. "No, Papa, it's not." Jake grabbed the calf, clearing its nose and mouth, rubbing vigorously. Come on, damn it. Breathe." Nothing. Martha watched his hands move desperately over the small body, watched hope drain from his face, watched defeat settle into his shoulders. Then the calf coughed. It was small, weak, barely a sound at all. But it was life. "There you go." Jake's voice broke. "There you go, sweetheart. That's it. Breathe." The calf coughed again, stronger this time. Its legs twitched. Its mother lifted her head, lowing softly. Rosie burst into tears. Martha found she was crying too, though she couldn't have said exactly why. Maybe because life was precious. Maybe because this man who'd lost so much had just fought so hard to save something small and helpless. Maybe because watching him refuse to give up made her want to refuse too. Jake sat back on his heels. His shirt ruined, his arms bloody to the shoulders. He looked at Martha across the newborn calf, and something passed between them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything. You stayed. You helped. That's something." The calf wobbled to its feet, unsteady but determined. Its mother began to clean it with long strokes of her tongue. "She's beautiful," Rosie whispered. "Can I name her?" "What do you want to call her?" Rosie looked at Martha, then at her father, then at the tiny creature taking its first trembling steps. "Hope," she said. I want to call her Hope." Jake's eyes met Martha's again. "Hope it is." They cleaned up in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. By the time they returned to the house, the sun was setting, and Martha's back screamed with exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. "We need to talk about the well," Jake said, pouring water from the nearly empty barrel. "About what Coleman said." Martha sat at the table, too tired to stand. "Is it really as bad as he claims?" "Worse." Jake's voice was flat. "We've got maybe 2 weeks of water left, less if the heat holds." "And the creek?" "Dry as a bone for 3 miles. I checked yesterday." Martha thought about the land she'd seen, the low places where water might collect, the way the ground changed from hard-packed earth to something softer near the old oak grove. "There's water somewhere on this property. There has to be." "Probably. But finding it and digging a well deep enough to reach it—" Jake shook his head. "That's weeks of work. Months, maybe. I don't have the hands, and I don't have the time." "You have me, Martha. And you have Rosie, and you have 2 arms and a strong back." Martha leaned forward. "I've watched you fight for every calf, every fence post, every inch of this ranch. Are you really going to let Coleman win because digging a well seems too hard?" "It's not about hard, it's about impossible." "Nothing's impossible, just difficult." Jake stared at her. "You really believe that?" "I believe in you." The words came out before she could stop them. "I believe you're the kind of man who doesn't quit, who fights for what matters, who—" "Stop." His voice was rough. Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing them." He stood abruptly, turning away. "You don't know me, Martha. You don't know what I've done, what I've failed at." "Then tell me." The silence stretched between them, heavy and waiting. "Sarah asked me to take her to Austin," Jake said finally, his back still turned. "Before she got sick. She wanted to see her sister one more time. But I said no. Too busy. Too much work to do." His voice cracked. "She died 3 weeks later. Never saw her sister again." "Jake, I could have given her that. One trip. A few days. But I was too stubborn, too focused on this damn ranch." He turned to face her, and his eyes were wet. "She died, thinking I loved the land more than I loved her." Martha rose and crossed to him without thinking. Her hand found his arm. "She knew you loved her. A woman always knows." "How can you be sure?" "Because Rosie knows. That child worships you even when you're too lost in grief to see it. She learned that love from watching you and Sarah together." Martha squeezed his arm. "Your wife didn't die doubting you, Jake. She died knowing her family would survive because you'd fight for them." A tear tracked down his weathered cheek. He didn't wipe it away. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "Any of it. The ranch, Rosie, I don't know how to let people in anymore." "You don't have to know how. You just have to be willing to try." He looked at her, really looked, and Martha felt something shift between them. Something that had been building since she'd first stepped off that stagecoach. "Martha." "Papa." Rosie's voice shattered the moment. "Papa, come quick. There's smoke." They ran. The fire had started near the east pasture where the grass was driest. Already it was spreading fast flames, licking hungrily across the land. "The cattle." Jake was moving before Martha could respond. "We need to drive them west, away from the fire." They worked in desperate coordination. Jake and Martha on horseback. Rosie running to open gates and clear paths. The heat was brutal, the smoke choking. Martha's eyes streamed and her lungs burned, but she kept moving. "There." Jake pointed to a cluster of cattle trapped against a fence line. "We need to break through." He rode hard toward the fence, throwing himself from the saddle to tear at the rails. Martha followed, adding her strength to his. "It won't budge." Together, on 3. They heaved. The rail cracked, then split. The cattle surged through, bellowing in fear. "How did it start?" Martha shouted over the roar of flames. "Don't know, but fires don't just happen in the middle of summer without a spark." Coleman. The name hung unspoken between them. They fought for hours, beating back flames where they could, driving cattle to safety, saving what could be saved. By the time the fire finally burned itself out against the creek bed, the east pasture was nothing but smoking ruin. Martha collapsed against a fence post, her dress destroyed, her face blackened with soot. Every muscle screamed. Jake dropped beside her, equally exhausted. "We saved most of them," he said. "Lost maybe 20 head, but it could have been worse. Could have been better too if someone hadn't said it. We don't know that for certain, don't we?" Martha turned to look at him. "Coleman threatens you yesterday and today your pasture burns. That's not coincidence." Proving it's another matter. Rosie approached, leading her father's horse. Her face was gray with ash and fear. "Papa, the well house caught some sparks. I put them out, but—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. If they lost the well, they lost everything. Word spread fast. By the next morning, half the county seemed to know about the fire. Some came to help, bringing food and water and willing hands. Others came to gawk, and some came for darker purposes. Agnes Miller arrived mid-morning with her mother and 2 women Martha didn't recognize. They stood in the yard watching the cleanup with expressions of false sympathy. "Such a tragedy," Agnes said loudly. "Poor Jacob. First his wife, now this. It's almost as if the land itself is cursed." Martha kept working, refusing to acknowledge them. "Of course," Agnes continued. "Some might say he brought it on himself, taking in strangers of questionable background." Martha's hands stilled on the bucket she was carrying. "What did you say?" Agnes smiled, sweet as poison. "I'm just repeating what everyone's thinking. A woman appears from nowhere, answers a fake letter, moves into a widower's home, and suddenly fires start breaking out. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Agnes stepped closer. "We did some checking. Miss Callahan sent a letter to St. Louis, to the Morrison Hotel." Martha's blood went cold. "They were very informative," Agnes continued. "Told us all about the cook who stole from her employer, who was dismissed in disgrace, who—" "That's enough." Jake's voice cut through the yard like a whip. He strode toward them, his face dark with fury. "Jake, I'm only trying to protect you." Agnes's voice went soft, pleading. "This woman is a thief. She was caught stealing from—" She was framed by a man who couldn't take no for an answer. Jake stopped in front of Agnes, towering over her. "I know the whole story. She told me herself." "And you believe her?" Agnes laughed incredulously. "Over a respectable businessman. I believe her over a man who fires women for refusing his advances. I believe her over gossips who spread rumors without knowing facts, and I sure as hell believe her over you." The yard had gone silent. Everyone was watching. "Jake." Helen Miller stepped forward, her voice carrying a warning. "Think carefully about what you're saying. Your reputation." "My reputation?" Jake's laugh was bitter. "I don't give a damn about my reputation. I care about the truth. And the truth is, Martha Callahan is the most honest, hard-working woman I've ever met. She came here with nothing and gave everything. She works alongside me in the dirt and the heat without complaint. She treats my daughter like her own." He turned to face the gathered crowd. "Anyone who has a problem with her has a problem with me. And anyone spreading lies about her being involved in this fire better have proof, because I'll take that personally." Agnes's face had gone white, then red. "You're making a mistake, Jacob Thornton. A terrible mistake. This woman is family." Rosie's voice rang out clear and strong. She stepped forward, her small chin lifted in defiance. "Martha ain't a thief. She ain't a criminal. She's kind and good, and she takes care of us." The girl's voice shook with emotion. She came here because I wrote those letters. Because I was desperate and scared and didn't know what else to do. If you want to blame someone, blame me. But don't you dare blame her for being brave enough to answer." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha felt tears streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the soot. This child. This fierce, loyal, impossible child. Helen Miller was the first to speak. "I think," she said slowly, "we owe Miss Callahan an apology." "Mother." Agnes's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Hush." Helen's eyes were on Martha now, and there was something like respect in them. "I've been in this territory 30 years. I've seen women come and go, strong ones, and weak ones, honest ones, and liars." She paused. "A liar doesn't work herself to exhaustion for strangers. A thief doesn't fight fires to save someone else's cattle." She stepped forward and extended her hand. "Welcome to Thornton Station, Miss Callahan. Properly this time." Martha took the offered hand, too stunned to speak. One by one, others followed. The men who'd come to help nodded their acknowledgement. The women who'd brought food murmured welcomes. Even some who'd been whispering moments ago offered grudging respect. Agnes stood alone, her face a mask of fury. "This isn't over," she hissed at Martha. "You don't belong here. You never will." Then she turned and stormed toward her buggy, her mother following with an apologetic glance. Jake moved to stand beside Martha. "You all right?" "I don't know." She was shaking. "Did that just happen?" "It did." His hand found hers, rough and warm. "And Martha, what I said about you being family." She looked up at him. "I meant it." The afternoon brought more surprises. A wagon rolled in carrying Reverend Elijah Brown, a man Martha had heard about but not yet met. He was older, dignified, with the kind of presence that commanded attention. "Mr. Thornton." His voice was deep and musical. "I heard about your trouble. Came to see if I could help." "Reverend." Jake shook the man's hand. "That's kind of you." "Kindness has nothing to do with it. This community survives by looking after each other." The Reverend's eyes swept across the burned pasture. "I also heard some talk in town about how this fire might not have been an accident." "We don't know anything for certain." "Maybe not, but I know Hector Coleman." The Reverend's voice hardened. "I know what he's capable of, and I know he's been wanting your land for years. Proving it's another matter. Perhaps, but witnesses can be found when people decide to look." The Reverend paused. "There's a man who works for Coleman. Name's Peters. He came to my church last Sunday looking troubled. Asked a lot of questions about forgiveness and guilt." Martha felt her heart skip. "You think he knows something?" "I think he might be persuaded to talk, if someone gave him reason to believe he'd be protected." Jake and Martha exchanged glances. "Where can we find him?" Jake asked. "He drinks at the saloon in town most evenings, usually alone, usually looking like a man with a heavy conscience." It wasn't much, but it was something. "Thank you, Reverend." "Don't thank me yet." The older man's eyes were serious. "Coleman has power in this county. Money and influence. Going against him won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." Martha heard herself echo her own words from days ago. "But some fights are worth having." The Reverend smiled slowly. "I can see why you chose this one, Mr. Thornton. She's got fire in her." "Yes," Jake said quietly, looking at Martha. "She does." That night, after Rosie had gone to bed and the ranch had settled into exhausted quiet, Jake found Martha on the porch. She was staring up at the stars, her mind churning with everything that had happened. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." He sat beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I've been thinking about what you said, about digging a new well. And there's a spot near the old oak grove. My father always said the ground felt different there, softer. He thought there might be water, but he never had the time to check." Martha turned to look at him. "We could check now." "It would mean working through the night. Every night after the regular chores are done. He paused. It might not work. We might dig for weeks and find nothing but rock. Or we might find water. Martha leaned forward. We might save this ranch, prove Coleman wrong, and build something that lasts. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. I'm not leaving Jake. Martha heard the certainty in her own voice. I don't care about the stage on Tuesday. I don't care about my original agreement. I care about you. About Rosie. About this land that's starting to feel like home. Jake was silent for a long moment. Then his hand found hers in the darkness. I was going to ask you to stay, he said quietly. Didn't know how to say it. Didn't know if you'd want to. I want to. Even after today, after Agnes and the gossip and everything that's going to come, especially after today. Martha squeezed his fingers. You stood up for me, Jake. In front of everyone. No one's ever done that before. They should have. But they didn't. You did. She turned to face him fully. That means something to me, more than I can say. He lifted his free hand to her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. Martha. Yes. I don't know how to do this. I told you before. I'm broken in ways I don't know how to fix. So am I. She leaned into his touch. Maybe broken people can help each other heal. He kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative. A question more than a statement. But when she answered by pulling him closer, it deepened into something real. Something that tasted like hope and smelled like smoke and felt like coming home after a very long journey. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jake rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not as hired help, not as a temporary arrangement. Stay as whatever we decide to become. Yes, one word, but it changed everything. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and deep beneath the old oak grove, water waited to be found. They started digging before dawn. The spot Jake had chosen was beneath a twisted oak that had stood for 100 years. The ground was softer here, just as his father had claimed. But soft didn't mean easy. By the time the sun rose, Martha's hands were raw and her shoulders screamed. Take a break, Jake said, pausing to wipe sweat from his face. You're not taking one. I'm used to this. So I'll get used to it too. Martha drove her shovel into the earth. We don't have time for breaks. They worked in shifts after that one digging, while the other rested. Rosie brought water and food, kept the house running, tended to the animals with a competence that broke Martha's heart. 10 years old and already carrying the weight of a grown woman. By noon, they'd dug 4 feet down. The soil was darker here, damper. Not water yet, but a promise. This might actually work, Jake said, running dirt through his fingers. My father wasn't wrong. How deep do we need to go? 20 feet, maybe more. Depends on the water table. Martha looked at the hole, then at Jake, then at her blistered hands. Then we better keep digging. That evening they went to town. Rosie stayed with the Hendersons' neighbors, who'd come to help after the fire, and offered to watch her while Jake and Martha handled business. The girl had protested, but Martha convinced her. We need you safe, Martha said, kneeling to meet Rosie's eyes. If something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong. Rosie's chin lifted. You and Papa are going to find that man and make him tell the truth. Then Coleman will go to jail, and we'll find water, and everything will be fine. The certainty of childhood. Martha wished she shared it. We'll try, she said. That's all we can promise. The saloon was loud and smoky, filled with men who stared when Martha walked in. Women didn't come to places like this, not respectable ones. But Martha had stopped worrying about respectability the moment she'd answered a fraudulent letter from Montana. There. Jake nodded toward a corner table. That's Peter's. The man was younger than Martha expected, barely 30, with the haunted look of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. He hunched over his whiskey like he was trying to disappear into it. Jake approached first, Martha hanging back. "Mr. Peters, mind if we sit?" The man's head jerked up. His eyes went wide with recognition and fear. "Thornton, I don't want any trouble." "Neither do I. Just want to talk." Peters looked around the saloon, clearly calculating escape routes. But Jake had positioned himself to block the easiest path, and Martha stood between him and the back door. "5 minutes," Jake said. "That's all I'm asking." Peters slumped. "What do you want?" "The truth." Jake sat down across from him. "About the fire on my land." "I don't know anything about—" "Don't." Jake's voice was soft but carried steel. "I'm not stupid, Peters. Neither are you. Coleman's been wanting my land for years. He threatened me 2 days before my pasture mysteriously caught fire, and you've been drinking yourself sick ever since." Peters' hands shook as he lifted his glass. "I could lose my job." "You could lose more than that." Martha stepped closer. "Arson is a crime, Mr. Peters. If someone died in that fire and someone nearly did it becomes murder." The man went pale. It wasn't supposed to. Coleman said it would just scare him. Just a little fire to make him see reason." Jake leaned forward. "So you did set it?" "Not me." Peters' voice cracked. I helped plan it. Told them where to start so it would spread toward the cattle, not the house." He buried his face in his hands. "God forgive me. I never wanted anyone to get hurt." Martha felt sick. This man had helped destroy their pasture, endangered their lives, and he wanted forgiveness. But she also saw his anguish, saw the guilt eating him alive. "Help us," she said quietly. "Tell the sheriff what you know. Testify against Coleman." "He'll kill me. He'll kill you anyway if he finds out you've been talking to whiskey bottles in public saloons." Jake's voice was hard. "At least this way you have a chance. The law protects witnesses." Peters looked between them, trapped and terrified. "You don't understand. Coleman owns half this county. The sheriff, the judge, the bank, they all answer to him. Your testimony won't matter. Mine won't either." "Maybe not here." Martha thought fast. "But what about Austin? What about federal authorities? Arson across state lines, conspiracy, attempted murder. Those are federal crimes." Jake shot her a surprised look. She shrugged slightly. She'd learned a lot about law during her own ordeal trying to fight accusations she couldn't disprove. Peters was silent for a long moment. "If I talk," he said finally, "I want protection. Real protection. Not some local deputy who'll sell me out for a bottle of whiskey." "Agreed. And I want a head start. Time to get my family out of the territory before Coleman realizes what's happening." "How long?" 3 days. Give me 3 days to get my wife and children to Denver. After that, I'll tell anyone anything." Jake considered this. Martha held her breath. 2 days, Jake said. "That's the best I can offer. Coleman's already suspicious. Any longer and he'll figure out what's happening." Peters drained his whiskey in one gulp. 2 days. But if anything happens to my family, nothing will happen. Martha spoke with certainty she didn't entirely feel. "We'll make sure of it." They shook hands across the table, an alliance born of desperation and mutual need. Outside, the night air hit Martha like a wall of heat. Even after dark, Texas didn't cool down. She leaned against the saloon wall, her heart pounding. "That was risky," Jake said. "It worked. For now." He stood beside her close enough that she could feel his warmth. "But Coleman won't go down easy, and if Peters loses his nerve, then we find another way." Martha turned to face him. "We didn't come this far to give up now." Jake studied her in the dim light from the saloon windows. "You're something else, Martha Callahan. I'm a fat cook from Ohio who answered a fake letter and fell in love with a stubborn rancher." The words were out before she could stop them. "I'm nothing special." "You're wrong." His voice was rough. "You're the most special woman I've ever met." He kissed her there in the shadows outside a saloon where anyone could see. Martha didn't care. Let them talk. Let them judge. She had Jake Thornton, and that was enough. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of digging and waiting. 12 feet, 15, 18. The soil got wetter, the hope got stronger. But the water didn't come. "What if we're wrong?" Martha asked on the second night, her muscles screaming, her hope flagging. "What if there's nothing down there?" "Then we try somewhere else." Jake's voice was steady. "And somewhere else after that. Until we find it, or we can't dig anymore." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple." He stopped digging and looked at her across the deepening hole. "Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple means you know what needs doing, and you do it no matter how hard." "Is that what you did after Sarah died?" The question surprised them both. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "After Sarah died, I stopped knowing what needed doing. I just went through motions. Wake up, work, sleep. Wake up, work, sleep. Rosie needed a father, and I gave her a ghost. You're not a ghost anymore." "No, but..." He climbed out of the hole and sat beside her. "You woke me up, Martha. I don't know how or why, but you did. You looked at me like I was still a man worth something, and I started believing it. You were always worth something. You just forgot." "Maybe." His hand found hers in the darkness. "But you reminded me. That's a gift I don't know how to repay." "You don't have to repay it." Martha leaned against his shoulder. "Just keep digging." On the morning of the third day, Peters was supposed to be safe. Martha woke with a knot of anxiety in her stomach that wouldn't go away. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't say what. She found Jake already in the kitchen, a letter crumpled in his fist. "What is it?" "Peters is dead." His voice was hollow. "Found this morning in his home. They're calling it suicide." The world tilted. Suicide. Hung himself, apparently. Left a note confessing to the fire and absolving Coleman of any involvement. Jake threw the letter on the table. Coleman got to him before he could talk. Martha felt the floor drop out from under her. His family. Gone. Disappeared in the night. No one knows where. Maybe they got out. Maybe Peters sent them away before. Maybe. But Jake's voice held no hope. Or maybe Coleman has them. Maybe that note was the price for their lives. Martha sank into a chair, her legs unable to hold her. They'd been so close. So close to bringing Coleman down. And now their only witness was dead. Their evidence was gone, and the man who'd tried to destroy them was untouchable. What do we do? Jake was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. We survive. We find water. We prove that no matter what Coleman throws at us, we won't break. That's not justice. No, but it's victory. He pulled her to her feet. Coleman wanted us to give up. Wanted me to sell and disappear. Every day we stay, every calf we raise, every drop of water we pull from this earth, that's us winning. That's us telling him he can't beat us. Martha wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But Jake was right. Sometimes justice was impossible. Sometimes all you could do was refuse to be destroyed. Then let's find that water, she said. They dug. 20 feet. 22. 25. Rosie joined them when she could, her small hands moving dirt with fierce determination. Even Tommy returned. His sister recovered, adding his strength to theirs. Heard what happened, the young cowboy said grimly. Peters didn't deserve that. But working for Coleman, he should have known better. He was scared, Martha said. Scared men make bad choices. Don't we all? On the fourth night at 28 feet, Jake's shovel hit something different. Wait. He dropped to his knees, digging with his hands. Wait. I think... water. Seeping up through the soil. Slow at first, then faster. We found it. His voice cracked. Martha. We found it. She scrambled down into the hole beside him, not caring about the mud or the dark or the tight space. The water was cold and clean and the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "We found it," she repeated, laughing and crying at the same time. "Jake, we actually found it." He kissed her there 28 feet underground, covered in mud and tears. "Marry me," he said. "What? Marry me?" His hands cupped her face. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Jake, you don't have to answer now, but I want you to know that I'm not asking because I need a mother for Rosie or someone to cook my meals. I'm asking because I love you, Martha Callahan. I love your stubborn spirit and your kind heart and the way you look at me like I'm still capable of being someone worth loving." Martha couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "I'm not pretty," she whispered. "I'm not young or thin or any of the things a woman should be." "You're everything a woman should be." His voice was fierce. "And if anyone ever tells you different again, I'll set them straight personally." She laughed through her tears. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Martha looked at this man, muddy, exhausted, determined, and felt something break open in her chest. All the walls she'd built, all the protection she'd wrapped around her heart, crumbled in an instant. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to everything." His smile was worth every hardship she'd ever endured. They climbed out of the well together, hand in hand, to find Rosie waiting at the top with a lantern. "Did you find it? Did you find water?" "We found it." Jake pulled his daughter into a hug, reaching out to include Martha. "We found everything." Rosie looked between them, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Are you getting married?" "Would that be all right with you?" Martha asked quietly. Rosie's answer was to throw her arms around Martha's neck. "It's what I prayed for," the girl whispered. "Every night since you came." Martha held her tight, this child who'd brought her here with forged letters and desperate hope, who'd fought for her family the only way she knew how. "Thank you," Martha whispered back, "for being brave enough to write those letters. Thank you for being brave enough to answer them." They stood together in the moonlight, three broken people who'd somehow found a way to become whole. The well was finished within a week. Word spread fast. The Thornton Ranch had water, good water, clean and plentiful. Cattle could survive. The land would endure. Coleman came himself to see it. Martha watched from the porch as the man rode up his expensive horse, gleaming, his expression carefully neutral. Jake stood waiting, arms crossed, blocking the path to the well. Thornton. Coleman dismounted with the ease of a man who'd never worked a day in his life. "I heard about your good fortune." It wasn't fortune, it was work. "Of course." Coleman's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I also heard you're planning to expand, buy out some of the smaller spreads that couldn't survive the drought. I'm considering it." "With what money?" "That's my concern, not yours." Coleman's smile thinned. "I'm going to make you one final offer, Thornton. $10,000 for everything. That's 5 times what I offered before." Jake was silent for a long moment. "No. Think carefully. This is generous. More than generous. It's blood money." Jake's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I know what you did to Peters. I know what you tried to do to my land. You can't buy what isn't for sale, Coleman." The mask slipped. For just a second, Martha saw the real man underneath, cold, calculating, utterly ruthless. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Coleman remounted, his movements sharp, with barely contained fury. "This isn't over, Thornton. It is for me." Jake didn't move. "Now get off my land." Martha watched Coleman ride away, her heart pounding. "He'll come back," she said when Jake joined her on the porch. "Let him." Jake put his arm around her. "We'll be ready." "How can you be sure?" Because I'm not alone anymore. He kissed her temple. And because stubborn beats mean every time. Martha leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. They had water. They had each other. They had a future worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Jake. When should we get married? He smiled, a real smile, the kind that had been absent from his face for 4 long years. How about Sunday? This Sunday. That's 5 days away. Too soon. Martha thought about everything she'd been through. The fire, the scandal, the endless journey west, the desperate hope that had brought her to this place. No, she said, not too soon at all. Jake's smile widened. Then Sunday it is. Sunday came faster than Martha expected. She woke before dawn, her stomach churning with nerves she hadn't felt since she'd stepped off that stagecoach 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. It seemed impossible that so much had changed in so little time. Rosie burst through the door without knocking, her face bright with excitement. You're awake. Good Mrs. Henderson brought over a dress. She said it was hers from her wedding, but she altered it to fit you. Come see. Martha followed the girl to the main room, where a dress lay spread across the table. It was simple cream cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Nothing like the elaborate gowns she'd dreamed of as a young woman in Ohio. It was perfect. Try it on, Rosie urged. Please. Martha took the dress to her room, her hands trembling as she slipped it over her head. The fabric was soft against her skin, the fit surprisingly good despite her size. Mrs. Henderson had done careful work. She looked in the small mirror and saw a stranger looking back. Not the desperate woman who'd arrived with nothing. Not the fat cook who'd been called a thief. Someone new. Someone hopeful. Martha? Rosie's voice came through the door. Can I see? Martha opened the door. Rosie's eyes went wide, then wet. You look beautiful, the girl whispered. Like a real bride. I am a real bride. I know, but... Rosie struggled for words. I was scared you wouldn't look happy. Mama looked happy on her wedding day. I've seen the picture. I wanted you to look happy too. Martha knelt down, pulling the girl into her arms. I am happy, sweetheart. Happier than I ever thought I could be. Promise you won't leave us. I promise. Even if things get hard. Even if Coleman tries to hurt us again. Even then. Martha pulled back to look into Rosie's eyes. I'm not going anywhere, Rosie. This is my home now. You're my family. Rosie's smile could have lit up the whole territory. I'm going to tell Papa you're ready. She ran off before Martha could respond. The ceremony was held at the ranch under the old oak tree where they'd found water. Reverend Brown officiated, his deep voice carrying across the gathered crowd. Most of the county had come. The Hendersons, the Millers, even Agnes, though she stood apart with a sour expression. Tommy and his recovered sister neighbors Martha had never met, who'd heard the story and wanted to witness the ending. Jake stood waiting, dressed in his best clothes, which weren't much, but Martha didn't care. He'd shaved for the first time since she'd arrived, revealing a jaw that was stronger than she'd realized. His eyes found hers as she approached, and something passed between them that needed no words. Dearly beloved, Reverend Brown began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jacob Thornton and Martha Callahan. Martha barely heard the words that followed. She was too focused on Jake's face, on the way his hands held hers, on the impossible reality that this was actually happening. Do you, Jacob, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. Jake's voice was steady, certain. And do you, Martha, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Martha's throat tightened. She thought of everything that had brought her here, the fire in St. Louis, the desperate journey west, the fraudulent letter that had somehow led to truth. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. Reverend Brown smiled. You may kiss the bride. Jake's kiss was gentle, but certain, a promise sealed before witnesses. When they pulled apart, the crowd cheered. Mrs. Thornton. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. I like the sound of that. So do I. Rosie threw herself at them both, laughing and crying. We're a family now, a real family. We were already a family, Martha said, holding the girl close. Now it's just official. The celebration that followed was simple, but joyful. Food appeared from nowhere, neighbors bringing dishes, sharing what little they had. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else found a guitar. Music filled the air, and people danced on the hard-packed earth. Martha watched Jake dance with Rosie, lifting the girl off her feet and spinning her in circles. The laughter that came from him was foreign, unfamiliar. She realized she'd never heard him laugh like that before. May I have this dance, Mrs. Thornton? She turned to find Tommy, his hat in his hands, his face earnest. I'd be honored. They danced, the young cowboy leading with surprising grace. I wanted to thank you, he said quietly, for what you've done for them. I haven't done anything special. You saved them. Tommy's voice was firm. Mr. Thornton was dying inside. Rosie was watching it happen. You brought them back to life. They brought me back to life too. Maybe that's how it works. Broken people fixing each other. Martha smiled. Maybe it is. The celebration continued into the evening. Neighbors came and went, offering congratulations and well wishes. Even Helen Miller approached Martha with something resembling genuine warmth. You've done well, Mrs. Thornton. Better than I expected. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. I was wrong about you. I hope you can forgive an old woman's suspicions. Already forgiven. Helen nodded, satisfied, and moved on. Agnes didn't approach. She stood at the edge of the crowd, watching with bitter eyes, until her mother finally led her away. Martha felt a flicker of pity for the woman. Agnes had wanted Jake for his ranch, his position. She'd never understood that love wasn't about what you could gain. It was about what you were willing to give. The guests departed as the sun set, leaving the Thorntons alone with their new beginning. Rosie fell asleep on the porch, exhausted from excitement. Jake carried her to bed, while Martha cleaned up the remnants of the celebration. Leave it, Jake said, returning to find her washing dishes. We can deal with it tomorrow. I don't mind. I do. He took the cloth from her hands. It's our wedding night, Martha. I want to spend it with my wife, not watching her do chores. She let him lead her outside where the stars had come out in impossible numbers. I used to sit out here with Sarah, Jake said quietly. After Rosie was asleep, we'd talk about the future, plans we'd make, dreams we'd share. Martha tensed, uncertain how to respond. I thought I'd never do that again. Never wanted to. He turned to face her. But then you came, stubborn and brave and refusing to let me disappear into my grief. Jake, let me finish. He took her hands. I loved Sarah. That will never change. But loving her doesn't mean I can't love you too. My heart's bigger than I thought it was. I don't want to replace her. You couldn't. You're nothing like her. A faint smile. She was quiet. You're loud. She was patient. You're stubborn as a mule. She accepted things as they were. You fight to make them better. Those don't sound like compliments. They are. His grip tightened. I needed someone like Sarah when I was young and stupid and learning how to be a man. But I need someone like you now. Someone who'll fight beside me instead of waiting behind me. Martha felt tears threaten. I'll always fight for you, for us, for this family. I know. He kissed her forehead. That's why I love you. They stood together under the stars, two people who'd lost everything and somehow found more than they'd ever had before. The peace lasted 3 days. On Wednesday morning, a letter arrived from Austin. Martha watched Jake's face go pale as he read it. "What is it?" "Peter's wife." His voice was hollow. "She's alive. She made it to Denver with the children. And she's willing to testify about what her husband knew." Martha's heart leaped. "That's wonderful." "There's more." Jake handed her the letter. "Federal marshals have been investigating Coleman for months. Bank fraud, land theft, bribing officials. Peter's fire was just the latest in a long line of crimes. They can arrest him. They're coming to do exactly that, this week." Martha read the letter, her hands shaking. After everything, the fire, Peter's death, the threats and intimidation, justice was actually possible. How did his wife survive? Peters sent her away the night before he died, gave her money, told her to run and not look back. He knew Coleman would kill him. He just wanted his family safe first. Martha thought about the haunted man she'd met in that saloon. He'd made terrible choices. But in the end, he'd tried to make them right. He was braver than I gave him credit for. Most people are when it matters. The marshals arrived on Friday. Martha watched from the porch as 4 men in federal uniforms rode up to the ranch. Jake met them in the yard, shook hands, pointed toward Coleman's spread. "Mrs. Thornton." One of the marshals approached. "I understand you witnessed Mr. Peters' confession in the saloon." "I did." "Would you be willing to provide written testimony?" "Absolutely." She spent an hour with the marshals, recounting every word she could remember. They wrote it down carefully, asked clarifying questions, nodded with satisfaction. "This helps," the lead marshal said. "Combined with Mrs. Peters' testimony and the evidence we've gathered in Austin, we should have enough to put Coleman away for a long time. He killed a man. That's harder to prove, but bank fraud alone will get him 10 years minimum. And once he's locked up, other witnesses tend to find their courage." They rode out toward Coleman's ranch, and Martha allowed herself to hope. That evening, they heard gunshots. Jake grabbed his rifle and ran for his horse. Martha followed, ignoring his protests. "Stay here." "No." "Martha, it could be dangerous." "Then you shouldn't go alone." They rode hard toward Coleman's spread. Rosie left with strict instructions to hide in the cellar if anyone came. The scene they found was chaos. Coleman's men scattered across the property, some running, some surrendering. The marshals had the main house surrounded. "Stay back," one called when he saw Jake approaching. Coleman's barricaded inside. "Anyone hurt?" "One of my men took a bullet. Not serious. Coleman's fighting like a cornered rat." Martha slid from her horse, keeping behind cover. She could hear Coleman shouting from inside the house. Threats, curses, wild promises that the marshals ignored. Then a different voice, younger, terrified. "Papa, please just surrender." "That's his son," Jake said grimly. "Samuel. He's maybe 16. Coleman has his own child in there. Looks like." The standoff continued for an agonizing hour. Martha watched the house, her heart pounding, praying for a resolution that didn't end in more death. Finally, the front door opened. Coleman emerged first, hands raised, his face a mask of fury. Behind him came the boy, pale and shaking, clearly relieved it was over. The marshals moved in quickly, cuffing Coleman, reading charges Martha couldn't hear from this distance, but she heard what Coleman shouted as they led him away. "This isn't over, Thornton. I have friends. I have money. You'll pay for this." Jake said nothing, just watched the man who'd tried to destroy them get loaded into a prison wagon. Martha took his hand. "It's over," she said quietly. "He can't hurt us anymore." "Maybe." Jake's grip tightened. "Or maybe this is just the end of one battle. Then we'll fight the next one too." He looked at her, and his expression softened. "Yes, we will." The weeks that followed brought changes Martha couldn't have imagined. With Coleman arrested, several of his former victims found their voices. Stories emerged of threats, bribes, fires that weren't accidents. The county began to reckon with years of injustice that had been hidden under respectability and money. Some of Coleman's land was sold at auction. Jake bought 40 acres that bordered his property, expanding the ranch he'd nearly lost. Tommy got engaged to Lucy Miller, much to Agnes's disgust. The young couple planned to build a small house on Thornton land, working for Jake in exchange for a future stake. And Martha discovered she was pregnant. She found out in September when the summer heat had finally broken and the first hint of autumn touched the air. The signs were unmistakable. She'd been sick every morning for 2 weeks. Jake. She found him in the barn mending a harness. "I need to tell you something." He looked up immediately, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took a breath. "I'm going to have a baby." The harness fell from his hands. "A baby?" "Yes." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." For a long moment, he just stared. Then he was on his feet, crossing to her, pulling her into his arms. "A baby," he repeated, his voice cracking. "Martha, a baby." "You're happy?" "Happy." He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were wet. "I thought, after Sarah, after losing our son, I thought I'd never have this again, never hold my own child again." "You lost a child. Stillborn, a boy. He came too early and we couldn't—" Jake's voice broke. "I've never talked about it. Couldn't." Martha understood something then. Jake's grief wasn't just for Sarah. It was for the future they'd lost together, the children they'd never have, the family that had been stolen by death. And now that future was being returned to him. "I'm sorry you went through that," she whispered. "I'm sorry you lost so much." "It doesn't matter now." He pulled her close again. "None of it matters. We're going to have a baby, Martha. Our baby." "Our baby." She agreed and let herself believe in miracles. Rosie's reaction was everything Martha had hoped for. A baby. A real baby. "I'm going to be a big sister." "You are." "Can I help name it? Can I hold it when it comes? Can I teach it to ride horses?" "Yes to all of those." Rosie threw her arms around Martha's middle, pressing her ear against the stomach that wasn't showing yet. "Hello in there," she whispered. "I'm your big sister Rosie. I can't wait to meet you." Martha stroked the girl's hair, her heart so full it hurt. This child she hadn't given birth to. This girl who'd written desperate letters to save her father and accidentally saved them all. "I love you, Rosie." "I love you too." Rosie looked up, her eyes bright. "Mama." It was the first time she'd used the word. Martha couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Is that okay?" Rosie's voice was suddenly uncertain. "I know you're not my real mama, but you feel like a mama. You act like one. And I want—" "It's more than okay." Martha pulled the girl close. "It's perfect." They held each other for a long time, mother and daughter, in all the ways that mattered. The baby came in April when the Texas prairie had burst into wildflower bloom. It was a girl. They named her Sarah Rose for the mother Rosie had lost and for Rosie herself. Martha held her daughter for the first time and understood finally why people said newborns were miracles. This tiny creature, red-faced and squalling, was proof that life continued, that hope survived, that even after fire and loss and seemingly endless darkness, there could be light. Jake cried when he held her, didn't even try to hide it. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Martha, she's so beautiful." "She looks like you." "She looks like hope." Rosie peered at her new sister with fascination. "She's so small. Was I ever that small?" "Smaller?" Jake said. "You were early. We weren't sure you'd make it." "But I did." "Yes, you did." Rosie reached out, touching the baby's tiny hand. Sarah Rose's fingers curled around her sister's thumb. "Hello, Sarah Rose," Rosie whispered. Welcome to the family." That night, after the baby was fed and sleeping, after Rosie had finally been convinced to go to bed, Martha and Jake sat on the porch watching the stars. "It's been a year," Martha said quietly, "since I answered that letter." "A year?" Jake shook his head. "Feels like forever. Feels like yesterday." "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" "No." His answer came without hesitation. "The only thing I regret is the time I wasted being afraid. The months after Sarah died when I shut everyone out. The years Rosie needed a father and got a ghost instead. You weren't ready." "Maybe not. But I'm ready now." He took her hand. "Ready for whatever comes next." Martha looked at this man who'd lost so much and still found the courage to love again. At the house that had become her home. At the land that had nearly defeated them but hadn't. She thought about the fat cook from Ohio, who'd answered a fraudulent letter because she had nothing left to lose. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another life. "I used to dream about escaping," she said, "getting out of whatever hard situation I was in and finding somewhere easier, somewhere I could just disappear. And now I dream about staying, about building, about watching our daughters grow up on this land." She squeezed his hand. "I found what I was always looking for, Jake. I just didn't know it until I stopped running." He pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence. The baby made a soft sound from inside, not crying, just existing, making her presence known. Rosie called out in her sleep, then settled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the moon. And Martha Thornton, who had once been Martha Callahan, who had once been desperate and alone, and convinced she would never belong anywhere, closed her eyes and let peace wash over her. She'd traveled 1,500 miles to answer a letter that shouldn't have existed. She'd found a family that shouldn't have wanted her. She'd discovered strength she never knew she had, and love she'd never dared to hope for. The journey had been hard. The struggles had been real. There would be more challenges ahead, there always were. But she wasn't facing them alone anymore. She had Jake. She had Rosie. She had baby Sarah Rose. She had a home that she'd helped build with her own 2 hands. She had everything. Martha opened her eyes and looked up at her husband. "I'm glad I answered that letter." Jake smiled, the full, genuine smile that had taken him 4 years to remember. "So am I." And there, under the vast Texas sky, surrounded by the family she'd chosen, and who had chosen her, Martha finally understood what she'd been searching for all along. Not a place. Not security. Not escape. Home wasn't where you came from or where you ended up. Home was who you loved and who loved you back. Home was right here in this imperfect, beautiful, hard-won life. And Martha Thornton was never leaving.